A trembling hand signed the dotted line, unaware her every breath now belonged to MGM. Behind velvet curtains, contracts were iron chains, and the knife went deeper still. Studios burned away heritage with scalpels and electrolysis, planted spies in assistants' uniforms, and rewrote lives on paper. Fame glittered on the surface, but the hidden cost was 18 ruthless laws of fame. No star could escape. Rule number 1. Sign away your soul. The pen scratched against paper as a trembling hand signed a contract. Not in blood, but it may as well have been. Behind the polished oak desk, a studio lawyer smiled thinly. The young hopeful thought they were sealing their destiny with fame. In truth, they had just locked themselves in a gilded cage. During Hollywood's golden age, contracts weren't offers. They were shackles. By the 1930s, MGM, Warner Brothers, and Paramount ran their stars like generals commanding soldiers. The deals stretched 7 years or more, binding an actor's every breath to a single studio. The glamour was dangled up front, $5,000 a week, a fortune for the time. But as audiences filled theaters and fan magazines printed their faces, the salaries often stayed frozen. The fine print had done its work. No renegotiations, no freedom. Elizabeth Taylor signed with MGM as a child, adored by audiences in national velvet. But by her teen years, the studio demanded she stay year after year in roles she had no say in choosing. Bette Davis fought Warner Brothers when she tried to accept richer roles in Britain, only to be dragged back by the courts like a runaway servant. When Olivia de Havilland refused yet another lifeless ingenue role in 1943, Warner locked her out of work for 2 years, punishing her with silence rather than freedom. The cruelty was hidden under velvet curtains. Stars were kept on a short leash with clauses forbidding them from taking outside work, controlling their appearances, even their public words. The studio's power was absolute. Refuse a role, and you were suspended without pay. Worse, every month suspended could be added back to the end of your contract, stretching the sentence like a prison term. To the public, the silver screen glittered with freedom and romance. Behind it, those very idols lived as indentured performers, their lives dictated from the front office. Each signature on studio stationery was less a career beginning and more a slow disappearance into corporate control. And if binding contracts could crush a star's spirit, the next rule proved the studios could go even further by reshaping the very bodies and faces they owned. Rule number 2. A whole new you. The smell of burning hair filled the dressing room as Rita Hayworth sat rigid, her scalp seared by hours of electrolysis. Each spark erased a trace of the woman she had once been, Margarita Cancino, until only Rita, the all-American siren, remained. It wasn't a makeover. It was a ritual sacrifice to the gods of Hollywood. Studios didn't just demand talent, they demanded transformation. A pretty face was raw clay, to be carved and molded until executives deemed it profitable. Norma Jean Mortensen was told her round cheeks were too sweet, her curls too plain. So the girl bleached herself into Marilyn Monroe, the perfect blonde fantasy. At Paramount, Archibald Leach became Cary Grant, his soft Bristol accent buried under years of diction lessons until every trace of his English roots vanished. Louis B. Mayer himself bragged that stars were manufactured cold-bloodedly from nothing, and the changes went deeper than names. Studios ordered nose jobs, chin lifts, even voice training long before such procedures were common. Joan Crawford endured endless dental work and painful skin treatments, all while MGM sculpted her into the poised glamour queen. Behind the flashbulbs, the message was clear. Who you were meant nothing. Who the studio said you were meant everything. The process often left scars, visible and invisible. Judy Garland was forced into a cycle of crash diets, her natural appearance ridiculed by executives who insisted on reshaping her into America's sweetheart. Even men weren't spared. Rock Hudson, before Universal crowned him their leading man, was drilled on how to walk, how to stand, how to project an image that wasn't his own. To audiences, the stars seemed effortless, immortal, but backstage, mirrors reflected ghosts of the people who once existed, stripped away under lights and scalpels. A star's face was no longer theirs. It was a studio's property, bought and paid for. And if Hollywood could remake your body, it could just as easily erase your very identity. A truth revealed in the next rule, where even a name was never truly your own. Rule number 3. What's in a name? The telegram arrived like a death sentence. Lucille Lesueur is no more. From this day forward, you are Joan Crawford. The actress stared at the slip of paper, realizing that even her very name had been stolen, reshaped to please an executive who thought Lesueur sounded too much like sewer. From that moment, the woman she had been ceased to exist. In Hollywood, birth names were considered blemishes. Executives wielded renaming as ruthlessly as a branding iron. Margarita Cancino was ordered to bleach away her Spanish heritage and emerge as Rita Hayworth, the all-American bombshell. The metamorphosis worked. Audiences adored her, but the price was lifelong alienation from her own identity. Cary Grant began life as Archibald Leach, a name Paramount executives deemed hopelessly unmarketable. They dressed him in sophistication and rechristened him, forcing the man from Bristol into a permanent role as America's suavest gentleman. The practice was so pervasive it became a cruel studio joke. Norma Jean Mortensen, too plain. Francis Gumm, laughable. Even Anthony Benedetto was rechristened Tony Bennett, years before his voice made him an icon. The logic was always the same. The audience must never be reminded of real roots, real struggles, or foreign bloodlines. A name had to be polished until it gleamed like chrome on a Cadillac. For the stars, the erasure was deeply personal. Judy Garland once confessed she mourned the loss of Francis Gumm as if that girl had died. Behind the MGM gates, executives insisted the transformation was progress. But columnists whispered about the chilling effect. Actors couldn't even sign their own autographs without studio approval. What began as a simple stage name became a permanent prison. To keep contracts alive, stars had to live, eat, and breathe under identities chosen by strangers. And when scandals erupted, those fabricated names bore the shame, ensuring the brand could be discarded if necessary, while the person inside was left broken. If a new name could erase a past, studios discovered they could go further still, renting out their human creations like property to the highest bidder. Rule number 4. Out on loan. The contract said she belonged to MGM, but her face lit up a Warner Brothers marquee. Elizabeth Taylor stepped onto a rival's set and smiled for the cameras, not as a free woman, but as property temporarily rented out. Her stardom was collateral, bartered between studios like a prized racehorse. In the 1930s and 40s, the studio system ran on deals struck behind closed doors. A star could be loaned to another studio if it suited the balance sheet. The actors themselves had no voice in the matter. Bette Davis seethed when Warner Brothers refused to loan her for more daring parts in Britain. MGM, on the other hand, occasionally loosened its grip when Taylor's box office magic could be traded for leverage. The irony was brutal. The very names that drew audiences into theaters had no authority over where they worked. Some stars made the best of it. Taylor shocked MGM executives when her borrowed films tackled subjects the studio never dared touch. Scandalous whispers of broken marriages, forbidden desires, and social taboos. Meanwhile, others like Olivia de Havilland faced a harsher fate. She resisted Warner's stranglehold and rejected the flimsy roles she was handed. In retaliation, the studio slammed every door, blacklisting her from outside opportunities and even warning competitors not to touch her. The loans themselves were carefully calculated acts of control. Studios collected fat fees from each transfer, reminding the actors they were revenue streams, not artists. Louella Parsons and Hedda Hopper filled gossip columns with speculation. Why was an MGM beauty working at Fox? Had she been punished? For fans, it looked like versatility. For the stars, it felt like exile. The cruelest twist: if a film bombed while a star was on loan, the blame followed them home. Contracts grew colder, roles diminished, and careers wilted under shadows cast by choices they never made. In the golden light of the cinema, their names shone across neon marquees. But in ledger books, they were reduced to numbers shuffled between moguls' desks. And if renting a star's labor was easy, one actress would soon prove that breaking the contract altogether was nearly impossible. Rule number 5. The de Havilland Rebellion. The courtroom was silent when Olivia de Havilland lifted her chin, her voice steady, almost regal. I will not play another one-dimensional girl. For the first time, a star wasn't acting out a script. She was defying the most powerful men in Hollywood. In 1935, de Havilland signed with Warner Brothers, catapulted into fame as Melanie in Gone with the Wind, but the glow quickly soured. Warner trapped her in endless ingenue roles, pretty faces with no soul, while her ambition burned hotter than the Klieg lights. When she refused parts she considered beneath her, the studio retaliated. Executives suspended her without pay, and each day of punishment was tacked onto her contract like an iron chain. By 1943, her 7-year agreement had stretched toward 9. Most stars bowed under this cruelty, fearing exile. But de Havilland, raised by a lawyer father, saw a loophole. In 1943, she filed suit against Warner Brothers, daring to accuse one of Hollywood's titans of illegal servitude. Gossip columnists devoured the scandal. Louella Parsons painted her as a reckless rebel, while Hedda Hopper warned she would never work again. The industry held its breath. The trial dragged on through 1944. Warner's attorneys argued contracts were sacred, that without them, the studio system would collapse. De Havilland stood firm. In a stunning 1945 decision, the California Court of Appeals ruled in her favor. No contract could bind an actor for more than 7 years, suspensions included. The ruling became known as the de Havilland Law, a crack in the concrete foundation of Hollywood's empire. The price was steep. For 2 years, she had no roles, no premieres, no applause. But when she returned, it was triumphant. Her work in To Each His Own earned her an Academy Award, proof that independence could coexist with greatness. As flashbulbs popped and champagne flowed, the moguls whispered with unease. If one woman could topple the system's grip, what else might the stars dare to defy? Rule number 6. Bought an education whether you wanted it or not. The young starlet froze under the studio lights, her voice trembling as the director barked, "Again. This time, sound like a lady, not a farm girl." Within days, she was not rehearsing lines, but sitting in a classroom, drilled by strangers who promised to rebuild her from the ground up. In old Hollywood, talent was optional. Studios believed they could purchase it, sculpt it, and demand it at will. When Ava Gardner first tested for MGM in the early 1940s, the verdict was cruel. She can't act, she can't talk, but she's sensational. Gardner was promptly shipped off to lessons, diction coaches, elocution drills, and endless practice until her southern drawl was ironed out of existence. Shirley Temple, adored in the 1930s, was no exception despite her natural charm. Fox executives ordered formal acting lessons to ensure her cuteness translated into craft. Her childhood was parceled out between school books and studio classrooms, the line between education and exploitation vanishing under the studio's gaze. Lauren Bacall's training was even more calculated. Director Howard Hawks insisted she lower her naturally high voice, forcing her to read aloud until the sultry register that made her famous became second nature. It was no accident. It was a manufactured trademark, branded onto her by the studio system. The lessons extended far beyond acting. Stars were taught how to walk, how to hold a cigarette, how to smile in photographs. Men were drilled in posture to look commanding. Women instructed to tilt their heads just so under a flashbulb. Publicity agents ensured that no slip of accent, no untrained gesture, would betray the studio's investment. For some, the lessons worked like alchemy, transforming raw youth into legends. For others, it was suffocating. The classroom became another cage, another place where individuality was filed down in favor of a marketable product. And if Hollywood could rewrite your very manner of speaking, it wasn't a stretch to imagine what came next, inventing entire pasts that never truly existed. Rule number 7: fake pasts for perfect futures. The press release read like a fairy tale. Joan Crawford, darling of MGM, born to a wealthy Southern family, raised in refinement, destined for the stage. The truth was less flattering. Lucille LeSueur, a girl from Texas who scrubbed floors in boarding houses and clawed her way out of poverty. But poverty didn't sell movie tickets, so the studio buried her past under satin and lies. Hollywood's publicity machines worked harder than any camera crew. Entire departments existed to rewrite lives, line by line, until the story matched the dream. Poverty became privilege, immigrant roots became all-American bloodlines, and scandalous families were quietly erased. By the time fan magazines hit the stands, audiences were reading myths carefully crafted by executives. Judy Garland's metamorphosis was one of the most ruthless. When the teenage star began to show signs of maturity, MGM panicked. Pregnancy, they feared, would destroy her image as the innocent songbird. The studio concocted tales of her eating habits. She eats like a truck driver, while quietly ordering doctors to prescribe dangerous pills to control her weight and energy. To the outside world, she was the perfect girl next door. Behind the studio gates, she was a teenager forced to live a lie. Rita Hayworth, too, discovered that the truth was expendable. Born to a Spanish father and Irish mother, she was recast as a pure American icon. Her Latin roots were scrubbed from her biography, her childhood rewritten so thoroughly that even her heritage became a forbidden subject in interviews. These fabrications were fed to gossip columnists like Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper, who dutifully printed the polished versions without question. Fans believed every word, never suspecting the truth had been cut away like scenes left on the editing room floor. In Hollywood's golden glow, stars sparkled as perfect illusions, illusions that often betrayed the fragile people trapped inside. And if the studios could erase a past with a single headline, they could just as easily work the present to death, grinding their stars until even the cameras could see the cracks. Rule number 8: worked to death. The spotlight hit Judy Garland's face at 3 in the morning, her sequined dress sticking to skin damp with exhaustion. She had been filming since dawn the day before, fueled not by rest, but by a cocktail of little pills slipped across her vanity. The cameras demanded she sparkle. The studio demanded she endure. Between 1930 and 1945, Hollywood produced over 7,500 feature films, a staggering pace that turned sound stages into factories. For every glamorous premiere, there were endless nights where stars rehearsed until their voices cracked, danced until their feet blistered, and collapsed in dressing rooms too small to hold their dreams. The machine never paused. MGM drove Garland the hardest. The Wizard of Oz may have made her immortal, but it nearly broke her in the process. 6 days a week, 18-hour shifts, no time to recover from adolescence before she was pressed into adulthood under studio lights. To keep her going, doctors under contract with the studios handed out energy tablets by day and rest tablets by night. It was medicine as management, chemical chains hidden in amber bottles. She wasn't alone. Mickey Rooney, another MGM workhorse, once confessed that his life was an endless treadmill. Work, eat, sleep, if you could. Stars who resisted the grind found their pay docked for delays, as if fatigue were a sin. By the time wartime propaganda films ramped up production in the 1940s, exhaustion had become a condition of stardom itself. Gossip columnists never printed the sweat. Louella Parsons reported on dazzling energy, never the swollen eyes beneath makeup. Fans saw tap-dancing smiles, not the price of rehearsals that ran into dawn. The illusion was seamless. Hollywood stars looked invincible because they were never allowed to rest long enough to appear human. The cruel irony was that the system's brightest lights often burned fastest. Behind the velvet curtains and champagne premieres, lives were being shortened in service of the next box office smash. And if the studios could wring every ounce of labor from their stars, they found new ways to twist the knife by demanding not only stamina, but perfect bodies carved to order. Rule number 9. The weight of fame. The studio head tapped the scale with his polished shoe, glaring as the needle wavered. 2 pounds too heavy, he muttered, while the trembling actress fought back tears. For stars of the golden age, even an ounce could mean humiliation, suspension, or the loss of their carefully manufactured careers. Hollywood contracts did not merely control roles, they dictated waistlines. Women were bound to clauses that demanded they maintain a slim figure, with weigh-ins as routine as costume fittings. Judy Garland, still a teenager at MGM, was cruelly nicknamed a little pig with pigtails. Executives enforced draconian diets, black coffee, chicken broth, and cigarettes, punctuated with pep tablets to keep her moving and rest tablets to bring her down. To the audience, she was Dorothy, a girl of innocence. Behind the screen, she was a prisoner of the scale. Greta Garbo, arriving in America in 1925, was bluntly informed by Louis B. Mayer, "In this country, we don't like fat women." The comment was less advice than decree. Garbo, who had mesmerized European audiences with her natural presence, found her body scrutinized with a coldness that reduced her art to arithmetic. Male stars were not immune, though their pressures were cloaked differently. Leading men were drilled in posture and fitness routines, with body measurements quietly recorded by studio trainers. Clark Gable's commanding physique was no accident. It was maintained under strict orders, yet it was the women who bore the brunt, forced into crash diets that left them lightheaded under hot studio lights, where perfection was demanded take after take. Fan magazines never revealed this cruelty. Louella Parsons described actresses as glamorous sylphs, while Hedda Hopper applauded their discipline. The public saw radiant gowns draped over slim silhouettes, not the toll of starvation disguised as glamour. Every red carpet flashbulb reinforced the lie. Beauty came effortlessly to the stars. In truth, their fame weighed heavier than any gold statuette, pressing down until bones ached under the glitter. Rule number 10. Love by contract. The wedding dress hung ready, but the bride didn't choose it, and neither did the groom. The union itself was scripted, arranged not by affection, but by the studio's publicity department. In old Hollywood, even love was staged for profit. Mickey Rooney learned this lesson in 1942, when he told MGM he wanted to marry Ava Gardner. Louis B. Mayer, the studio titan, slammed the door on the idea. Rooney was America's mischievous boy next door, and Gardner was being groomed as an exotic beauty. Together, Mayer believed, they threatened the illusion. Only after pleading and promising to keep it private were they permitted a quiet ceremony. Others weren't so fortunate. Jean Harlow, MGM's platinum goddess, was rumored to have a contract clause forbidding her from marrying William Powell, the man she adored. A single vow could puncture her carefully packaged image, so executives kept her chained to stardom and away from the altar. The most chilling manipulation came for stars whose real relationships defied social expectations of the era. Hollywood had no tolerance for scandal that might jeopardize box office receipts. To keep appearances, Studios orchestrated marriages of convenience. A glamorous actress might be paired with a leading man she barely knew. Their staged smiles plastered across fan magazines. Behind closed doors, separate bedrooms told the real story. Columnists like Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper fueled the charade, trumpeting whirlwind romances that were anything but. Fans swooned over storybook love affairs, never realizing the contracts were written not in ink, but in iron. For women, the double standard cut deepest. Stars were told marriage would ruin their appeal, that a husband might tarnish their fantasy of availability. Yet if gossip hinted at affairs, the studio rushed to announce an engagement, whether the couple wanted it or not. In the end, Hollywood didn't just own its stars' careers. It laid claim to their hearts, dictating when they could love, who they could touch, and how much they were allowed to show the world. And if love itself could be forged in boardrooms, even something as personal as clothing could be stripped of freedom under the next rule. Rule number 11. Dresses, not pants. The maitre d' at the Brown Derby froze, then shook his head. Marlene Dietrich, in tailored trousers and a man's jacket, was denied a table. Cameras caught her turning away, cigarette dangling, eyes blazing with defiance. In that moment, fashion wasn't just fabric. It was rebellion. Hollywood in the 1930s enforced an unwritten uniform. Women were expected to embody femininity as defined by studio bosses. Gowns, skirts, and carefully tailored silhouettes. Pants were not merely discouraged, they were forbidden. A 1933 movie classic article reported studios had given direct orders. Their women stars should not be photographed in male attire. A pair of slacks could unravel an entire illusion. Katharine Hepburn, fiercely independent, clashed with RKO's costume department over this rule. One day, when staff stole her beloved trousers from the dressing room to force compliance, she marched around the lot in her underwear until they returned them. It was a small act of rebellion, but it rang louder than any line of dialogue she delivered on screen. Studio heads believed trousers carried dangerous symbolism: independence, strength, freedom. For men scarred by the Depression and threatened by shifting gender roles, the image of a woman in pants was seen as a direct challenge. So contracts included fashion clauses, ensuring starlets remained the embodiment of delicate femininity. Even off-screen, the rule bled into daily life. In 1938, a woman in Los Angeles was sentenced to jail for wearing trousers in court. Against that backdrop, stars like Dietrich and Hepburn weren't just breaking fashion codes. They were breaking laws of propriety. Gossip columnists pounced, warning that mannish behavior would destroy careers. Yet the public, especially women watching from home, took note. Fashion magazines soon reported rising sales of slacks, quietly inspired by the very stars studios tried to police. The rebellion was spreading, stitch by stitch. But if a pair of pants could spark scandal, the next revelation proved Hollywood's control extended even further into shadows, where spies listened for secrets no costume could hide. Rule number 12. Spies in every shadow. The actress poured herself a drink, certain she was alone. But the waiter polishing glasses nearby wasn't working for the restaurant. He was working for MGM. By dawn, every word of her conversation would be typed into a report and delivered straight to the studio front office. Hollywood's power brokers didn't trust their stars to behave once the cameras stopped rolling, so they built secret networks. Assistants, chauffeurs, even janitors were paid to watch, listen, and whisper back what they saw. Judy Garland learned this in the cruelest way. Her own personal assistant, Betty Asher, who tucked her into cars and fetched her scripts, was secretly meeting every week with MGM executives. Garland later recalled sobbing for days when she discovered that even her closest confidant had been spying on her private meals, late nights, and fleeting romances. The practice was systematic. Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons often received tips directly from these shadow networks, ensuring scandals could be managed before they erupted. If a star dined with the wrong companion, the studio heard about it by morning. If they slipped away to a doctor or confided in a friend, the moguls knew before the ink dried on the tabloids. Even directors weren't spared. Script clerks and production assistants were tasked with recording their every move. If a filmmaker strayed from the studio's vision, executives were alerted instantly, their careers hanging on typed memos written by underlings. This culture of surveillance bred paranoia. Stars smiled at luncheons, uncertain which waiter carried 2 trays and a secret agenda. They learned to whisper in hallways, to keep blinds drawn in dressing rooms, to doubt even family members placed conveniently on studio payrolls. The irony was bitter. While fan magazines painted Hollywood as a dreamland of freedom and romance, the people who made those dreams lived under constant suspicion. And if betrayal could hide in a friendly smile or a servant's nod, the next rule revealed something darker still. Silence itself could be weaponized, written into contracts like invisible chains. Rule number 13, the silence clause. The typewriter keys clacked as a secretary slid a contract across the desk. Buried in the fine print was a chilling line. The artist shall not speak or publish any statement contrary to the interests of the studio. For many stars, their voices were sold before they ever opened their mouths. The silence clause was Hollywood's most insidious weapon. It gagged actors from revealing abuse, exploitation, or even simple dissatisfaction. Bette Davis, once one of Warner Brothers' brightest jewels, tried to speak out in the 1930s about the vapid, lifeless roles she was forced into. The punishment was swift: suspension, blacklisting, and rumors seeded in the press to paint her as difficult. The message was clear: silence was survival. Studios wielded the clause to bury scandals that might tarnish their investments. When Clark Gable was involved in a car accident in 1940 that claimed a pedestrian's life, MGM scrambled to protect their moneymaker. Lawyers and publicists rushed in, silencing witnesses, shielding Gable, and ensuring the story never reached the full glare of scandal. The silence clause extended beyond contracts. It became an unspoken law of the system. Columnists like Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper were complicit, printing only the stories fed to them by studio publicity departments. Any star who dared speak candidly risked career death. Joan Crawford privately railed against MGM's control, but in public, her every word dripped with studio-approved charm. The cruelty of the clause wasn't just professional, it was personal. Judy Garland, trapped in cycles of exhaustion and doctor-prescribed remedies, tried to seek help. Instead, MGM punished her with financial penalties and public smears, while contracts forbade her from admitting the truth. Her silence wasn't voluntary. It was enforced with threats to her livelihood. Audiences of the 1940s believed they knew their idols, hanging on every interview. In reality, they were hearing dialogue scripted as carefully as the films themselves. Every smile on a radio broadcast, every quote in a magazine, had been rehearsed under contract. And if silence could be purchased so easily, the next rule showed how even family ties, the bond between parent and child, could be rewritten by the studios themselves. Rule number 14. Mother knows best. According to the studio, the cameras adored her dimples, but Shirley Temple's childhood was rehearsed more than lived. At just 6 years old, she wasn't simply memorizing lines. Her own mother was drilling her on how to move, when to smile, and even how to cry on cue. Hollywood didn't just buy the child, it bought the parent as part of the bargain. Studios quickly learned that mothers were the perfect enforcers. A parent desperate for their child's success could be coaxed, bribed, or outright threatened into keeping the young star in line. Mothers signed contracts, negotiated salaries, and too often became extensions of the studio system itself. Judy Garland's mother, Ethel, was notorious for siding with MGM executives over her daughter's desperate pleas for rest. When Judy balked at another marathon shoot, her mother reportedly reminded her, "You'll sing whether you feel like it or not." The arrangement worked because it blurred the line between maternal care and corporate obedience. Studios sent checks to the parents, not the children, ensuring loyalty. When Mickey Rooney grumbled about exhaustion, MGM appealed directly to his mother, reminding her of the lifestyle his salary supported. Resistance crumbled quickly when a family's fortune hung in the balance. Some mothers reveled in their power. Stage mothers became Hollywood figures in their own right, known on the lots for their iron fists and unwavering discipline. Gossip columnists painted them as devoted, but insiders whispered that many were stricter than any director, pushing their children beyond reason. The darker irony came later, when child stars tried to break free. Many discovered their fortunes drained, mismanaged by the very parents sworn to protect them. Jackie Coogan, the beloved silent-era child actor, famously sued his mother and stepfather in the 1930s after realizing his millions had vanished. His fight gave birth to the Coogan Law, a rare check against parental control, but too late to save his childhood. On screen, mothers were written as paragons of sacrifice and devotion. Off-screen, the studio often cast them as wardens, enforcing curfews, diets, and punishing schedules. And if parents could be deputized into control, Hollywood's next cruelty showed how even health itself could be sacrificed at the altar of profit. Rule number 15. Image first, health last. The doctor's prescription pad didn't belong to him. It belonged to the studio. With a nod from the front office, he slid a bottle across the table, knowing it would keep a star standing for 18 hours under the lights. Health was negotiable. Image was not. Judy Garland embodied this merciless equation. During The Wizard of Oz, she begged for rest. MGM's response was swift. Stimulants to keep her awake for rehearsals, then sedatives at night to force sleep on command. If she faltered, the cost of production delays was docked from her salary, leaving her trapped in debt to the very studio that drained her. Her smile on screen was radiant. Her body off-screen was collapsing. The cruelty wasn't reserved for Garland. Jean Harlow, MGM's Platinum Blonde, suffered from gallbladder illness during the filming of Saratoga in 1937. Executives refused to halt production. Instead, they adjusted shooting schedules, propping her up between takes. By the time cameras stopped rolling, her health had been pushed past the point of no return. Studios employed their own doctors, men whose loyalty was to moguls rather than patients. Their job was to patch, inject, and prescribe until the cameras could roll again. Studio medicine became a euphemism for quick fixes. A shot for pain, a pill for nerves, another to quiet the mind after grueling shifts. Publicists worked in tandem, concealing every hospital visit behind cheerful headlines. Fan magazines described radiant recoveries and glamorous resilience, never mentioning the true toll. Gossip columnists fed the illusion that stars were tireless demigods, immune to the human fragility audiences themselves endured. The irony was sharpest in wartime, when Hollywood churned out morale-boosting musicals and patriotic dramas. While the nation saw symbols of vitality dancing across screens, the very actors were breaking down backstage, their health sacrificed for box office glory. Behind the silver glow of the projector, a darker truth lingered. In old Hollywood, a star's body was not their own. It was a resource to be mined, polished, and spent until nothing remained. And if even flesh and bone could be consumed by the system, then something as simple as friendship could also be deemed too dangerous to keep. Rule number 16. Forbidden friendships. The photograph never made it to print. A studio publicist snatched it from the hands of a reporter, furious that a leading actress had been caught dining with the wrong companion. In Hollywood, who you were seen with could be as dangerous as any scandal. The studio system controlled not only stars' romances, but also their friendships. Contracts often included morality clauses that stretched far beyond the set, warning actors to avoid unsuitable company. What defined unsuitable? Anyone the studio feared could taint a marketable image. If an actress was spotted with an outspoken activist, a blacklisted writer, or even a rival star, the executives' phones rang by morning. Katharine Hepburn, fiercely independent, was warned repeatedly about her social circle. She befriended playwrights and intellectuals the studios considered too radical, prompting whispered threats that her career could stall if she didn't distance herself. Even her partnership with Spencer Tracy was managed carefully, their private loyalty hidden under layers of official denials. For other stars, the stakes were harsher. During the Red Scare of the late 1940s, friendships with suspected sympathizers could mean career death. Actors like Edward G. Robinson, who openly supported liberal causes, found themselves under suspicion simply for attending dinners with the wrong crowd. Studio bosses, desperate to protect profits, pressured stars to cut ties or risk being labeled themselves. Even beyond politics, simple companionship could be censored. Young actresses were often warned against befriending older divas for fear of tainted reputations. Rivalries were manufactured in tabloids to keep fans engaged, while real friendships were quietly discouraged. Behind the cameras, camaraderie was dangerous. Isolation was safer. Fan magazines painted Hollywood as a glamorous social world, with stars linked arm in arm at charity galas. In reality, those pairings were carefully orchestrated photo ops, approved and staged by publicity departments. The genuine bonds, the stolen moments of trust, had to be hidden in back rooms and shadowed corners. And if the wrong dinner companion could cost a star their livelihood, the next rule revealed how even public duty itself could be twisted into another weapon of control. Rule number 17. Political puppets. The flashbulbs popped as a smiling starlet waved at a rally she hadn't chosen to attend. Her gown glittered, her patriotism rehearsed. But behind her fixed smile lay the truth. She was there because the studio told her to be. In the 1930s and 40s, Hollywood actors weren't just entertainers. They were stage props in America's political theater. Studios ordered them to attend war bond rallies, charity galas, and public demonstrations, not out of personal conviction, but as part of their contract. Clark Gable was pushed into selling war bonds after the death of his wife, Carole Lombard, when MGM realized his grief could be packaged into patriotic fervor. During World War II, the Office of War Information worked hand in glove with studios, dictating what stories should be told and which faces should promote them. Stars like James Stewart, who actually enlisted, stood as exceptions. For many others, appearances were a matter of survival, not choice. A refusal could brand an actor as uncooperative, a dangerous label in an era where careers lived or died on public image. The practice extended beyond patriotism. Studios pressured stars into supporting political candidates, appearing at fundraising dinners, and signing their names to statements they never wrote. Fan magazines glowed with tales of Hollywood's unity, but insiders knew the truth. Dissent was silenced, loyalty manufactured. Even gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper wielded politics as a weapon, praising stars who towed the line while hinting at scandal for those who resisted. When the Red Scare swept Hollywood in the late 1940s, the game turned deadly serious. Some actors were forced to attend anti-communist rallies simply to prove their innocence. Edward G. Robinson, once hailed as a patriotic voice, found himself interrogated for signing petitions deemed subversive. Careers were destroyed not by actions, but by associations, and the studios pulled the strings throughout. For audiences, the illusion was flawless. Radiant stars beaming with civic duty. Behind the curtains, they were pawns on a chessboard of politics and propaganda, their voices scripted as surely as any dialogue. Rule number 18. Exit at your own risk. The telegram arrived like a guillotine. Do not hire her. With those words, a studio ensured that a once bright star would never again see her name on a marquee. In Hollywood, walking away wasn't freedom. It was professional death. The system thrived on fear. Stars who defied contracts or tried to carve independent paths discovered the studios had long memories and even longer knives. Lupe Velez, the fiery Mexican actress, dubbed the Mexican Spitfire, saw her career dwindle the moment she clashed with studio bosses. She was too outspoken, too uncontrollable, and suddenly her offers evaporated. Publicists whispered she was difficult, a death sentence for any career. John Garfield, celebrated for his gritty realism at Warner Brothers, wanted more creative control. By the late 1940s, his refusal to bow to the studio system, coupled with his political leanings, made him a target. Blacklisted, he watched his career collapse while the same executives who once profited from his talent turned their backs in silence. Studios didn't merely cut ties, they salted the earth. If a star left on bad terms, gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper became executioners, filling newspapers with rumors planted by the very moguls who wanted them erased. Careers were ruined not on screen but in print, with reputations shredded before fans even knew the full truth. Even box office giants weren't safe. When Jean Tierney resisted being typecast and sought greater control over her scripts, the backlash was swift. Fewer roles, harsher scrutiny, and whispered claims of instability. Freedom was punished with invisibility. To audiences, it seemed as though stars simply faded, their light extinguished by time. In reality, many were deliberately snuffed out by the same studios that had created them. Leaving was not an escape, but an invitation for the machine to bury you. For every star who dared to dream of independence, the warning was clear. Hollywood could make you immortal, but if you tried to leave, it could just as easily erase you, one headline at a time. Beneath the shimmering gowns and golden spotlights, Hollywood's dream factory was built on rules that silenced, reshaped, and sometimes destroyed the very stars it promised to immortalize. Behind every dazzling smile was a contract, a secret, or a sacrifice. Which of these rules do you think was the most shocking? Did one of these hidden stories change the way you see a star you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective.